Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Fix Game Week 15 live stream. My name is FPL Nacho, and I am delighted to be bringing today's Game Week 15 live stream because we have plenty to discuss. And I can already see some people in the chat already. I see Sugar, Adorn, Jocks, Rami, hope you're doing well, Finty, Tom, of course, moderator. Be sure to answer all those questions. We're going to be answering everything going on in the world of fantasy football. So if you are new around here, guys, or you are returning, be sure to share the love and like this live stream and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future live streams coming along, because with these fixtures coming thick and fast, you don't want to be missing a single thing on this channel, guys. So I really appreciate sharing the love on this live stream. And quick shout out, fantasyfootballfix.com. If you haven't already, be sure to upload your squad for free on the website. Get yourself the opportunity to check out all our free tools available, and be sure to check out our free trial of the premium tools for a limited time. Gives you an opportunity over this winter period to really get yourself engaged on all the brilliant tools available, because I know it's helped me, and I don't think there's a better time to do it when the fixtures are coming thick and fast. So schedule for this live stream, guys, as always, going to be engaging with you guys in the chat. That's going to be a regular occurrence throughout the video, but I want to put a little bit of structure to this video just so we can cover the main talking points, and of course I can really use the Fantasy Football Fix website to back up some of the arguments. So I think that's going to be a really good place to start. So we're going to be looking at the transfer stats going into Game Week 15, really get an idea on what direction the FPL community is going towards into this weekend. We're then going to be looking at the first hot topic, which is going to be Watford forwards, and that's going to be King versus Dennis. I know a lot of people right now are deliberating whether to go for the likes of King or Dennis to really fund other moves in their team. So we're going to go in deep dive into that underlying stats to help you choose the right Watford forward. Then we're going to be looking at the Elite 11, and then, of course, going into hot topic number 2, which is going to be, do you keep Antonio? That is the big question. Are we going to be keeping Antonio? And then we're going to be delving into those Man United assets, because I think that's what you're all here for, really, isn't it? Ronaldo's, the Sanchos. We're going to be looking a bit more into those, and, of course, those Man United fixtures. When is the right time to be bringing those in? So, as I mentioned, guys, let us kick this off with our transfer activity. And you can see on here, obviously on the screen, we have the top transfers in, top transfers out going into Game Week 15. And there's no surprises right now off the back of that goal against Chelsea. Dennis being the most transferred in player ahead of Game Week 15. You can see over 400,000 transfers in for him. And it's quite surprising, really, because of that home fixture against Man City. I think really those people that are bringing in Dennis are probably thinking more of the longer term and the value rather than the early returns that you're going to see in Game Week 15. Because as we know, Man City defensively still one of the best teams in the league. And I really don't think that we're expecting much from Dennis going into this fixture. But over the longer term, that's where the rewards could be obviously gained. And then Jota still returning week in, week out, 300,000 transfers in ahead of his away fixture against Wolves. Again, no information whether Firmino is actually available or not. So while he is out, Jota still remains an amazing asset in this Liverpool team. And the third one, Bernardo Silva, away against Watford in Game Week 15, being brought in by over 250,000 managers. I know, again, that is somebody that a lot of people are discussing whether to bring in or not. So that is one we're going to be covering as well later on in the video. And so notable transfers out. Antonio, obviously with his home fixture against Chelsea and the blanks that he has been suffering so far this season, I really do think that that is somebody who is really on the knife edge, whether managers are completely giving up faith on him or whether they are considering just sticking through it, because the fixtures do start to turn with Antonio going forward. And Reece James, surprisingly, being sold by 180,000 managers. Now, it's worth mentioning, Reece James has been confirmed available for the weekend. So if you are one of those managers that still owns James and is contemplating whether to sell him or not, I really do think it's worth considering holding him, because we know he is available and he's been such a brilliant asset so far this season. So last bit on here, guys, I want to come down to the top 10 transfer combinations across FPL for us to get a real idea on what direction the community is going in. And as you can see there, the number one transfer combination across FPL is Hwang to Watford's Dennis, making up 7.5% of all transfers. And again, if you are a Hwang owner right now, you did really own him for the recent fixtures. And we know from Game Week 15, the fixtures do start to swing for Wolves. So being an owner of Hwang, I don't really think it is a time to hold him going forward. Yes, he could return here and there, but as you can see with Jimenez being the second most transfer combination to Dennis, managers have had enough of Wolves' assets, that's for sure. And I really do think that Dennis is a nice sideways move for Hwang owners, just to keep the funds low and to spread them across the rest of your team if needs be. So I think that is definitely a transfer I would consider if you are a Hwang owner and you don't have additional funds available to upgrade in other areas in your team. Now, Jimenez to Dennis is kind of justifiable of why those Wolves fixtures are really putting off managers. Again, Dennis offers so much great value, and while you're not going to get the short-term returns for Dennis, over the longer term, you would argue that he is going to be good value for money going forward. And last up, the last transfer I want to cover is Antonio to Dennis. Dennis really being the theme of the Game Week 15 transfers so far. 4.3% of those transfers, as you can see, Antonio to Dennis. Quite surprising, really, because you would argue that West Ham over the next 8 fixtures are arguably the same difficulty fixtures compared to Watford. So quite a surprising move there. But again, if managers are looking to free up funds to upgrade their defence or midfield, that move from Antonio to Dennis can definitely be that viable pick to free up those additional funds. So that one there is, while it's surprising, I can understand managers and why they are making those moves. So as I said, guys, we are going to be dipping into the chat as well. I just want to see who is on here. Alex saying, is Nacho stop the Ronaldo rise? Now, of course, we do have our price predictor over on fantasyfootballfix.com, but unfortunately, I don't have the power to dictate these price changes. I apologise. Otherwise, I'll be working my magic behind this laptop and stopping that price rise. But unfortunately, that does look like it is the market forces right now, and it could be one that you might need to move on right now if you do want to avoid any sort of price change on Ronaldo. Rainer said, is it too late to go in on Maddison? Really good question, and one I want to touch on in a bit in this video, so be sure to stay patient because I'm going to be looking at the projected points and the underlying stats for Leicester midfielders in particular, so we can have a look at whether Maddison is more of a flash in the pan sort of player, or whether there is going to be potentially consistent returns going forward. And I think one in particular is worth mentioning is with Tielemans' injury, that is going to be very much dependent on Maddison's output. I really do think when Tielemans comes back into the team, we're not sure how that's going to operate with Ndidi, Samari in midfield. Are we going to see both of those play in centre mid to really stop the leak of Leicester goals? Or can he accommodate both of those defensive midfielders, Tielemans and Maddison? I think that's something definitely for us to consider going forward with Maddison. But I will promise you to check out those underlying stats on Maddison. We've got another question from Aaron that's saying, should I transfer out Alan St. Maximin for Watkins? Well, I really think that St. Maximin probably for this particular game week is his last game week that you really want to hold him. After that, we know Newcastle get into a really tough run of fixtures. So I probably would say holding St. Maximin for one more game week is probably the viable pick. And then afterwards, Watkins is definitely somebody that is in the conversation as an FPL differential going forward. With Ings' injury, we know that Watkins is becoming a bit more of a pick in that Aston Villa side. Playing a bit more centrally, we know, going to get more opportunities rather than operating on that left side. So I think that's definitely helping him in this Aston Villa team. So I definitely think that is somebody we need to consider going forward. So first hot topic, guys, we are going to be looking at Manuel Dennis versus Joshua King. Two Watford forwards that have been in brilliant form across the course of the season, offering really, really great value for us as FPL managers. As we know, with the premium defenders in the game, with Salah basically taking up basically an eighth of our funds, we really do need to find these FPL gems during the season. And while it might not be essential to own a Watford forward from now into the end of the season, we do need to identify when the time is right to go in on these players. So right now, as I mentioned with the transfer activities, Dennis is the man that everybody is piling into. Off that back of the goal against Chelsea and a really lively performance based on the eye test, we know that he is probably the guy that if you were just watching that one game in isolation, I can understand why managers are going for him going forward. But Josh King is somebody we do need to discuss as well. So as you can see there, Dennis is outscoring King right now, 73 points to 53 points for Josh King. And points per game, Dennis is delivering there 5.6 points to 4.4 points for Josh King. And as you can see, only slightly more minutes for Dennis there. I wouldn't necessarily say there's a big enough discrepancy for us to argue that Dennis is skewing the data here. I think we can justify our logic here on these minutes. But the big one here is Dennis with 12 bonus points in comparison to Josh King's. So bonus point magnet Emmanuel Dennis is being. Whether that will continue, of course, that's the FPL gods in the FPL bonus points community dealing with that one. We don't really know necessarily how they work from time to time. But 12 points there, we do know that Dennis is attracting those bonus points. So first up, we'll be coming down to the Fantasy Football Fix touch heat map, just to get an idea on how both are operating in this Watford team right now. Now, of course, this is data taken from game week 1 to game week 14. So it's worth mentioning that obviously under Ranieri, there has been probably slight changes in the formation and the touch maps that they're picking up. But I do want to look at it over across the course of the season, because I don't think we have enough data yet with Ranieri to really make real justified picks. So I like to look at it over the longer term, because they both have been playing consistently and in similar positions. It's not like Josh King was operating as a right winger in a 4-4-2 and now playing centre forward. He was always playing as the front man in this Watford team. And as you can see on the touch map here, Dennis more likely to operate in those wider areas of the pitch, predominantly on the left and right hand side from time to time. But you can see the touch map for Josh King is predominantly in and around those posts, which we do like to see, obviously, as an FPL forward. But it doesn't say that Dennis isn't getting around those parts. So you can see that definitely around the 18-yard box, getting those touches, which is great to see, and on the left-hand side. So definitely accommodating those attacking touch heat maps. When we come down to the general underlying stats here, I want to bring it down to the total statistics here for us to get a real idea on these two players, because I know everybody is discussing them right now. So, cold hard facts. Dennis is outscoring in FPL points and in goals. 6 now for Dennis, 5 for Josh King. But for those that really do like to look beyond that for the underlying stats, this is where Josh King really comes into his element. You see that expected goals 5.81 in comparison to Dennis's 2.89. Now, it's worth mentioning the expected goals do take into account penalties, whereas we know Dennis isn't a penalty taker in this Watford side. And with Sarr's long-term injury in the Watford team, we are assuming that Josh King is going to be the penalty taker for Watford, which is adding just another string to that bow, which I really do think is something we need to consider when we consider both of these assets. So you can see that big discrepancy there in the expected goals, and showing that Josh King, if anything, is underperforming in his output. Now, the shots department, super close, 26 to 27. Shots on target, 13 to 10. And even shots in the box. I mentioned that Josh King was picking up the ball more in the box, but it's actually Emmanuel Dennis that has had more shots in the box, 23 to 22. And even the expected assists here, super close, 2.59 to 2.07. So the underlying stats do favour Josh King in the goals department, but Dennis is slightly beating him in the other areas. So what is the best Watford pick? Well, first and foremost, is it time to bring in a Watford forward? Well, I think going forward, we need to look at the fixtures. Now, Man City at home is probably not the best time to target a Watford forward. However, I really do think that if it's a strategy that you're doing where you're looking to bring in a Watford forward and maybe downgrade an Antonio or a mid-price forward to free up funds in your squad, I don't mind bringing in a Watford forward ahead of Man City at home, because he most likely is going to sit on your bench, or, you know, might have to play. But you're looking at it more over a longer term and more of an option that is going to free up additional moves in your squad. So I'm not against managers making those moves in game week 15. But looking at the fixtures going forward, Man City at home to kick off in game week 15, I'm expecting them to get, you know, comfortably beat in comparison to what Chelsea done against them. I think Man City on the ball, and just the way they're playing right now, defensive underlying stats, I'm not expecting Watford to get much joy. But after that, Brentford away, Burnley away, Crystal Palace at home, and Wolves away. So while they're not necessarily easy fixtures and teams that are conceding plenty of goals, I still think these are really good fixtures to own an FPL asset like these Watford forwards. And one other thing I want to touch on quickly is the Africa Cup of Nations. Now, it's worth mentioning that is not going to happen until, you know, game week 21, game week 22. And a lot of people are worried about Dennis going off into, I believe, the Nigeria squad in the Africa Cup of Nations. Well, it's first and foremost worth noting that game week 21 is 6 or 7 game weeks away. There is plenty of game weeks, so do not be worried about the African Cup of Nations. That is not an issue with Dennis here, because there's so many game weeks between now and game week 21. So I'd rule out that as a reason not to bring in Dennis. The other discussion here is is Dennis worth the little bit less to free up in your squad? Well, Josh King currently priced at 5.7 and Dennis priced at 5.4. So there's only 0.3 million difference here. And if I was to go into one Watford asset right now, I think I would still just favour Josh King. Now, I know, recently Dennis has been the man to target, obviously off the back of that goal against Chelsea, but I just think personally that with these underlying stats, with Josh King being on penalties, I just think that the 0.3 more over the longer term is going to pay dividends. So right now, if I had to bet and put one Watford player in my team, it would be Josh King. But I really do appreciate that Manuel Dennis is in unbelievable form right now, and it's very difficult to look past. But guys, let me know in the chat, who is your Watford choice? Let me know. I'm really interested to know who is your discussion being. So let me know, guys, in here. I can see a lot of people here chatting about the likes of Alonso, Chelsea defenders. Somebody about Ronaldo's flagged. We're going to get into Ronaldo in a bit. Colin saying James is falling tonight potentially. Yes, it's worth noting that James is on the cusp. It's worth noting that. But again, Tom's dropped in there the link to the price change predictor, so be sure to open that up on another tab. Don't avoid this one, guys, and you can check that one out, of course. But yeah, see here, Sahil saying Dennis, the menace, obviously going for that one. I think, again, I can't argue anybody going for Dennis. Colin going for King. Ollie going for King. We've got Hassan going for Dennis. Yeah, so a real split here, but I appreciate that Dennis is the recency pick, but I just think Josh King, with his underlying stats and with the penalties, would be my play going forward. So, guys, next up, we're going to be looking at a brilliant part of the Fantasy Football Fix website, something that I really would encourage you guys, if you are going to get involved in the Fantasy Football Fix community, with the premium tools available. And as I mentioned, you can sign up to a free trial to check out these premium tools. Is going to be the Elite 11. And this is a great part of the website. If you haven't checked it out already or don't know anything about it, it is basically what we're going to say, I'm not going to call it a boy band of FPL managers, but I'm going to say it's accumulation of top managers. You can see there 74 top 10k finishers and 55 top 5k finishers. I know Dan is in the chat right now, so if you have any questions, guys, and you don't believe any of my opinions, and I think Dan's the man, definitely, if we can get anything off him. But we basically have here up-to-date teams of these elite managers, and what you can do is come into the Elite 11 team reveal section and basically see up-to-date live teams and their transfers going into each game week. So you can see here the consensus 11, which is basically the average players across all of the elite managers, which has built a team for us here. And you can see Sanchez. It's no surprises here, some of the players being picked, Jotas, the Salahs, and you can see there the game week 15 consensus 11 top captains is going to be 100% Mo Salah. Whoever's tuned into these live streams of the last few weeks knows that every time I come into this section, it is always Salah at 100%. And really, guys, with these top managers all going 100% Salah, I think that's enough of a reason to go for Mo Salah going into game week 15. But I know there's been a few managers in the Elite 11 that have actually pulled the trigger and brought in a particular Watford forward. So I want to come down here and we're going to look at Mr. Black here to look at his transfer going into game week 15. You can see there that he pulled his transfer 2nd of December at 12:30 a.m. Bit of a night owl, I'll be in bed by then. But Broha to Dennis. So obviously going for the Dennis move over Josh King. Again, not sure the reasons for Mr. Black there, but it's clear, as I mentioned, my personal opinion is King, but an elite manager here is going for Dennis. So guys in the chat, if you are veering more towards King, you've got the backing of Mr. Black here for sure. And the great part about this, guys, just a quick update, is with the likes of Mr. Black here and all these different managers available, what we're able to do is come into the show bio section and it gives us an idea of what kind of manager that elite manager is. So for example here, Mr. Black, it favours fixtures over form, uses few stacks and goes with gut instinct. So if you were signed up to Fantasy Football Fix and you really resonated with Mr. Black here, then you would probably think to yourself, this is the guy that I want to follow. Whereas there might be another elite manager which might be more stats focused, less gut, and fancies more form over fixtures, then that could be the manager for you. And you can track that manager progress by activating the push notifications or activate email alerts. So you might get a horrid email at midnight from Fantasy Football Fix updating you that Mr. Black has made those transfers. Probably a reason why I wouldn't follow Mr. Black, because he'd be waking me up on a work night. But that's a brilliant part of the Fantasy Football Fix here. It just keeps you up to date on some top managers. And the other one I'll look at is, one of my favourite team names here is Copenhagen Wednesday, coming down here. And you can see here his number of top 10k finishes is a joke, and obviously top 5k, that's why he's part of the Elite 11. And you can see here that he has also gone for Emmanuel Dennis, shifting out Davis, I believe, of Aston Villa. Obviously a non-playing forward, looking to strengthen that squad and bringing in Dennis as his move. So you can see with his squad there, he actually does have Antonio, Tony and Dennis now. And he obviously didn't choose to sell Antonio, so that's quite interesting there, noting that could have been an easy downgrade for Antonio to Dennis. But strengthening that squad over this winter period is something that is definitely something we need to consider going forward. So guys, let me know what you thought about the Elite 11 section. It'd be really good to see what your thoughts are here. And like I said, drop in any questions you want answered. I'm going to pick them up later to go into a real open the floor Q&A deep dive into each specific question. But what I want to do is just cover all of the main hot topics, just so we don't miss any of those big discussions here. But we have got some good discussions in here. Mio saying thanks. Dan saying really nice bench, that from Jack. Yeah, obviously, like I said, guys, in the chat, if you can help one another, that'd be brilliant. So next hot topic, guys, I want to touch on Antonio. Now, I know a lot of people are discussing, do we sell Antonio? He has been woeful in recent game weeks. I think as being an owner right now, I have been for the last few game weeks debating whether to sell him. He hasn't been the beast that we knew of at the start of the season. So do we go for him? Do we not? Let's have a look at the fix comparison matrix on Fantasy Football Fix. And what I've decided to do here, and it'd be really interesting for you guys in the chat to let me know if you want to tweak some of these stats going forward. I've decided to look at this from game week 4 to game week 14. Now, the reason being is because a lot of people right now are looking at Antonio's stats, and he's still not top of the pile, but he's in the top 5 for a lot of underlying stats. But it's worth noting that from game weeks 1 to 3 was when he was in absolute beast mode. So naturally, those underlying stats are not outdated, but they do skew the data a little bit, because when we look at it from game week 4 onwards, that's really where the slump started to happen for Antonio, and a lot of managers are now starting to question those underlying stats. So I decided to look at him in comparison to other popular forwards in similar price brackets like King, Watkins and Wilson, just to see how he is doing in comparison to these other forwards in their underlying stats. And as I mentioned, if you want me to throw up any other underlying stats, then I can drop them in this fixed comparison matrix. Or even if you want me to add another forward into the equation, then I can do that also. So we can see here, first and foremost, what I really like about the fixed comparison matrix is it integrates our predicted points over the next 5 game weeks. And you can see that Antonio is predicted to score 25.3 points over the next 5 game weeks, which is much more than the likes of King at 19.2, Watkins at 18.9 and Wilson at 20.9. So that's really worth mentioning first and foremost, that while Antonio has been in really poor form recently, and a lot of managers are considering selling him, he is predicted to score more points than any other of the players that we have been discussing recently. And I know a few people here are saying about Dennis. I'm just going to drop Dennis into the equation as well, because obviously somebody that we have really been looking at from an FPL perspective, of course, in the Watford forward line. So first up, we can see over the last game weeks from 4 to 14, Dennis is dominating in FPL points, 58 points, second best being King, then Watkins, and even Callum Wilson outscoring Antonio over this period. So you can see why, when the likes of Dennis, who is nearly 2 million plus cheaper than Antonio, why managers are really questioning the value of Antonio as an FPL asset. You can see here goals, he's being beaten by Wilson, Watkins, King and Dennis, with the Watford boys getting 5 apiece. And you would think to yourself, okay, he's not scoring goals, but he's doing stuff in the assist department. Zero assists over this period, which is ridiculous, because it's not necessarily a case of West Ham being terrible over this period. They've still been getting results, grinding out results and scoring goals. So it's crazy to see that over this period, he's only scored 2 goals and he's got 0 FPL assists. So I find that crazy to see, but clearly he has been in a real barren run. And the likes of King picking up 3 assists and Dennis picking up 5 assists when you match the two with their goals and assists, there's no comparison between the assets right now. And touches in the opposition box, again, Antonio with 53, probably the only real underlying stat that he is actually doing well in comparison to the other assets. Watkins topping that on 55 and King on 52. So you see there, guys, underlying stats-wise, Antonio really isn't matching up to assets that are cheaper than him. And I can totally understand why managers over recent game weeks have been moving away from Antonio because the stats aren't there. I know West Ham are performing okay, but there isn't enough at 8 million. I think really the only reason managers have been holding for this long is because the value built up in him from game week 1. Obviously, he had crazy double price rises, and that has basically been the reason why managers have been holding on to him this long. But I still think there is still justification to potentially hold him going forward. You can see there with the predicted points of 25.3. If you move sideways to the Watford boys or the Watkins or Wilson, we still haven't predicted to score more points than these assets. So while you might be, annoyed at Antonio, really not guessing that he's going to do very well going forward, I still think there is value in him going forward. And when we look at the fixtures going forward for all teams over the next 6 game weeks, I can see some great opportunities for the likes of, of Antonio. Now, I've gone over to the fans fixture analyzer, and we can see over the next 6 that Crystal Palace top the charts for fixture difficulty. They have Man United away, but then they have Everton and Southampton at home, followed by Watford, and obviously that brilliant Norwich at home fixture. When we come down here to West Ham, I really think that they have some good fixtures in here, which still make Antonio a great asset. Now, if the Chelsea team that played in game week 14 rocks up against West Ham, I think there is a chance for West Ham. With that midfield, we know that there is an opportunity for West Ham to dominate them with Rice and Souček. However, I do think that Jorginho is going to be available for Chelsea in that game, which completely changes the landscape of Chelsea as a team. And we are expecting Reece James to be back as well, which is obviously going to really strengthen them defensively. But Burnley away, even Arsenal away, I'd argue is an okay fixture. Then Norwich at home, Southampton at home, and Watford away. I personally think that these are still great fixtures for Antonio over this period. Now, I appreciate that you probably are looking at Watford as an asset. So when we come down here, as I mentioned, Man City being a very tricky fixture, but then Brentford, Burnley, Crystal Palace, Wolves, and West Ham. So I really do think that, I know a lot of managers going into the Watford forwards for the funds available, but honestly, I still think West Ham fixtures going forward are very, very good. And I would second guess about selling Antonio, even though he's been so poor recently. And I really want to know, guys, in the chat, what are your plans with Antonio? Are you selling him? What are your plans? Are you shipping him out? Is there another asset that you really got your eye on? I really want to know, guys, what your plans are with Antonio going forward. Just checking out here. We've got a few chat here, overpriced. A few people are saying about that. I agree. I think that Antonio can be considered overpriced as an asset, but I just think that with the fixtures going forward, I think there's definitely an argument for him being a great asset going ahead. Now, what I didn't mention is his expected goals. I know a lot of people like their underlying stats. I can see FPL Harry keeping Antonio, Colin keeping Antonio. I really do think that there is still great value in him. And my question to you is, and I open this to the floor, guys, if you are selling Antonio, where are you going? Now, I really do think that if you are going to a Watford attacker, then there is reason to do that. Mainly because we know that there is going to be funds available to upgrade the rest of your squad. But otherwise, where are you going? We know DCL isn't available yet. We know Bamford's only just coming back from injury. Yes, you could upgrade to the likes of Ronaldo or Lukaku's or maybe not Harry Kane now. But otherwise, I really think that holding him is just the best way. And I know a lot of managers like to jump onto the next best thing. I'm getting a little love here about keeping Antonio. A lot of people here are keeping Antonio. We've got Chloe TV keeping Antonio. Frederick Kane out, Antonio in 100%. Tom's shouting hold. It's great to see other people are in the same bracket. And I really do think that holding him longer term, I know it's been a long hold for everybody, is going to pay its dividends. And I really do think that you probably do have other players in your squad that are more of a priority than selling Antonio. So that is the fixture analyzer covered. That is Antonio covered, guys. I think this is going to be a great opportunity for us to delve into the questions. I can use the Fantasy Football Fix website to answer plenty of questions going forward. But last thing I want to do, just before I get into that, because I know a lot of you guys tuning in right now are going to really appreciate this, is our predicted points is brilliant. Honestly, guys, it's brilliant. I'm just loading it up now. Apologies for the wait on this one. So we have the predicted points over the next. I'm going to put it for the next 6 game weeks. I think that's a good span for us to look at. And first and foremost, I want to look at it from a general consensus on all players. And this is going to answer a lot of the captaincy questions as well, because managers right now are considering going against Mo Salah for the weekend because of the likes of Harry Kane with a great home fixture against Norwich. Ronaldo off the back of his brace. Do we go for him with his fixture against Crystal Palace, which is definitely what's it called? I can't even say the word. It's definitely a good fixture for us to target. But when we look at Salah over the next 6 game weeks, he's predicted to score 49.5 points. Guys, 49.5 points. Second best is Cristiano Ronaldo on 38.6. And if you said to me that Ronaldo was going to score 38.6 points over the next 6 games, I would be like, what the heck? So for Salah to be 11 points clear of that, I just think completely kills the argument of where to captain going forward over the coming game weeks. There's not a single fixture that is skewing his projected points here. Whereas Ronaldo has a 5.6 in game week 18, and you look at the likes of Jota, a 4.1 in game week 18. Salah's underlying stats, his form, the fixtures coming up, the way we predict these projected points, and his minutes, of course, basically just show that he is the captaincy pick going forward. So I want to jump into the forwards in the projected point section, as I know a lot of managers right now know their midfield with the likes of Salah, but with the forward line, I really am looking forward to the way that this is going to pan out. I believe over the next 5 game weeks, we're going to see a crazy change in the FPL landscape. So right now, basically, there is 2 different mindsets right now. You either go for a premium forward, and managers have been going for Harry Kane or Ronaldo, or you've been going for the mid-price forwards, but basically it hasn't been delivering for you. Obviously, you probably had Antonio. Tony's been ticking along okay, and you've been you've been doing well with the Watford forwards. But I'm really looking forward to the way that FPL is going to be going over the coming game weeks. Ronaldo back in the equation now that Ralph is at the wheel. Antonio, I believe, is still going to be a brilliant asset coming forward. And I'm expecting him, for those who sell him, to start wanting to bring him back in, maybe around game week 16 or 17. But it's the players that have really been out of the equation that I'm really looking forward to. Chelsea's Lukaku, currently predicted to score 23.7 points. Now, I would argue that his expected minutes are skewing this a little bit. We don't know whether he's going to be a guaranteed starter week in, week out because of his fitness issues. I really do think that if he does get guaranteed minutes over the coming game weeks, you will see those predicted points improve over that time period. But as I mentioned, Bamford returning to Leeds. We've got premium assets available now in the likes of Ronaldo and Lukaku. And maybe we see the likes of DCL emerging with the Watford forwards. I really do think that we're going to be seeing a shift now towards FPL forwards. Let me know in the chat if you are agreeing, disagreeing with that kind of logic. But I really do think that that is the direction that we are going to be going towards in the coming game weeks, predicting here a bit of mystic ball sort of work. But I appreciate you guys checking out the underlying stats and the projected points for forwards. So this is going to be a great opportunity for me to go into the questions, to pick up some that are being consistently mentioned, and we can go through each one. And if I have missed your question, guys, if you posted it earlier on, don't be afraid, drop it back in the chat. What I'll do is I'll pick it back up and we can start discussing it. And obviously what I can do here is use my own opinion, which is kind of okay. I don't necessarily say I'm an expert, but I have a little bit of knowledge, and we can also use a Fantasy Football Fix website to back up my arguments. And if we do get the rare occasion where I tell you to buy one player and all the stats say the other, then maybe go with the stats, because I don't know whether I back myself sometimes. So let us have a look at some of the questions here, guys. And obviously, like I said, please drop in any questions you do have, then we can pick them up. So Imran saying, if you haven't sold Antonio yet, then why would you now? And that is a really good point. When we looked at Antonio's fixtures over the last few game weeks, we can see him here that you held him, if you are an Antonio owner, for the likes of Tottenham, Villa, Liverpool and Man City. So if you were brave enough to hold him over that period, then the fixtures coming up, as we can see here, Chelsea at home, followed by Burnley, Arsenal, Norwich, Southampton, Watford. Not really the time to sell him. You can see on the projected points there, once you get the Chelsea fixture out the way, it is Antonio time. I'm calling it. So Although he might be falling in price tonight, as you can see, he has exceeded the 100% threshold. So we are expecting him to fall in price. I still think he's the whole, guys. And it's a great point there that if you have held him this long, it probably isn't the time to sell him. And you're probably going to kick yourself over that period. So really good point there, Imraz. I really do appreciate that. So we've got here some stuff here. Just checking them out. Avista said, keep Antonio and thinking to buy another West Ham player. Okay, so you're looking at buying another West Ham player going forward. So that's really interesting to check out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to head over to the projected points, and we're going to be looking at West Ham assets. So first and foremost, we need to look at the likes of, let's compare them. Let's compare the assets on the fix. Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to get my laptop back up so we can look at these assets as a whole. So as an actual asset, I really don't think there's any West Ham asset that you're going to be considering in the front line. So after that, we're really considering the three behind. So we're going to be looking at Jared Bowen. We're going to be looking at Ben Rama, if I can spell Ben Rama. And we're also going to be looking at, of course, Fornals. These three in particular. Now, if managers are brave enough to consider these sort of assets, then this is where we are looking at right now. You can see that Bowen is projected to score 21.3 points over the next 5 game weeks. Ben Rama 18.3 and Fornals 17.7. And you can see the price pretty similar with Bowen after some recent price rises, probably being the go-to guy in regards to that price point. And minutes-wise, really, really similar. So when we come down here, the FPL points-wise, Ben Rama still leading in 63 points. But I would argue that that is kind of all come at the start of the season rather than recent. I think recently, Bowen and Fornals have kind of taken the mantle in that West Ham side. You can see goals here, still for Fornals winning in 4. FPL assists is really where Bowen is coming into his own with 6. It's worth mentioning, he has mainly been the set piece taker on corners, so he has been picking up a few clean sheets, FPL assists from set pieces. Whether that is going to continue or not, we will see, but he is one of those assets that does take set pieces, which is very important. And you can see the shots there, still very close, but Bowen just leading the way on 32. So looking at his underlying stats, I think that's a really good point about other West Ham assets. I personally wouldn't touch any other West Ham assets. If you have Antonio, I would stick with him, but if you want to go 4-1 in the midfield, maybe to downgrade to free up other funds, then Bowen is definitely your man, I believe. But let me know in the chat, guys, is there any other West Ham assets you're considering? Is it defenders you're considering? Be really interesting to know what direction you are going in. Okay, so this is where we need to talk, guys. This has been the one that I knew was going to come up, and I think that we need to have a bit of a section on it, and it is going to be the best Man United assets. Okay, so this is probably one of the biggest talking points right now. Ralph at the wheel right now. We know that they are going to become, I think the assumption is that Man United will become a bit of a beast. They're going to be getting coached in a certain way, which I think is tailored towards the Premier League. And it sounds like he is a top coach. Again, I personally don't know enough about him. But with the players that they do have available, I think a lot of managers, FPL-wise, are very optimistic about particular players in the game. So let us have a look at some of the assets that we have considered at Man United. So I'm going to use a fixed comparison matrix again, because I think this is a really good way of comparing multiple assets against one another. And we're going to be looking at, of course, Cristiano Ronaldo. We're going to be looking at Jadon Sancho. We'll be looking at Rashford. And we'll be also looking at Fernandes. And of course, if you want me to add in any other assets, then please let me know in the chat and I will drop them in. Obviously, if you're watching this back, guys, and you're not in the live stream, then unfortunately I can't update it. I apologise. So let us look at the underlying stats. Now, it's worth mentioning, Rashford is completely, like, way less minutes than any other assets. What I can do here, just to give us a good idea on how they're performing per game, is to do the show averages per game. And what this does basically is just gives us a bit more of an idea on how they are performing against one another when one asset is significantly less in regards to minutes. Because obviously a player like Fernandes, who's played 1,200 minutes in comparison to 300 for Rashford, we would expect Fernandes to dominate him in all departments. So first and foremost, it's worth mentioning that those projected points, I've just seen Greenwood being dropped in the equation as well, so I'm going to drop Greenwood in as well. Great point. Now, what I would say first and foremost with Man United assets is we don't know what Ralph is going to go towards. So, first and foremost, I really do think that if we were looking at Man United assets, I think a really good strategy to do is to wait for game week 15 to happen before you pile in on one of these assets. And the main reason being is because it's going to give us one game to see how he plays his teams, what formation he goes for. He could surprise us. He could go for a Cavani Ronaldo double up top. He could go for a front three and favour Greenwood over Sancho. We really don't know what he likes. But what we do know is the fixtures are brilliant for Man United. So I can't go against any manager considering going against a Man United player. So you can see here, projected points over the next 5 game weeks. Ronaldo dominates in this area. 31.3 projected points over the next 5 game weeks. Fernandes, the only one who's slightly close on 26.8. And then we have 14.4 for Rashford, 10.3 for Sancho, and 13 for Greenwood. Now, what is worth mentioning is, I think we know that Fernandes and Ronaldo are going to be an integral part of this Man United side going forward. I think Sancho, Rashford and Greenwood are going to be getting game time for sure, but we're not sure which ones are going to be favoured in this system. So I think that is what is skewing these projected points. I really do recommend, if you are a member of Fantasy Football Fix, coming over to the Fix Comparison Matrix, maybe in a few game weeks' time, to check out these projected points, because I can guarantee you if Sancho plays 290 minutes and starts to show what he really can do, those projected points are going to shoot up. So, looking at the averages per game, you can see Ronaldo, 5.1 points per game, been in brilliant form so far this season. And Greenwood and Fernandes still ticking over nicely on 4.6. Now, of course, Greenwood, most of these points come in at the start of the season when he was a brilliant asset. Can he rekindle that form? I don't know just yet. I really do think that even if Greenwood starts in this Ralph team, he is going to be a massive rotation risk. So it's worth noting that. Now, goals, 0.5 goals per game for Ronaldo. Greenwood and Fernandes ticking over nicely on 0.4. As you can see there, Sancho still hasn't really delivered in that department for Man United, but we saw really good glimpses of him in the game against Arsenal, creating great opportunities. And again, assists for Sancho, really nothing there, whereas Ronaldo is still being the man in that department. And shots, 3.5 shots per game. The only man that's coming close to that is Greenwood on 3.1, followed by Fernandes on 2.4. So, a lot of people have been asking about what is the Man United asset to go for. And I think the answer to this is being patient is probably the best strategy, I think. Now, Kane to Ronaldo in game week 16, I would recommend, is an obvious move to make. We know that they are like for like in price and it is an easy swap from Kane to Ronaldo. Spurs' fixtures start to swing. Man United's fixtures start to get brilliant. And that is a very easy way to get basically a chunk of that Man United pie in the coming game weeks. But I really do think at 8.9 million, at 9.4 million, the likes of Rashford and Sancho are really interesting assets. And the main reason being is because of that chunk of cash that you're going to save for assets that might be delivering week in, week out. Now, I'm going to put my neck on the line. If Sancho can get guaranteed game time in this Man United side, I really think that he is the play to make in the coming game weeks. But I would highly recommend managers waiting for game week 15, see how the team pans out, gain a bit more information, and then we can start to understand what this Man United team starts to look like. But let me know in the chat, guys, who is your go-to Man United asset? I know that Ronaldo is the top asset, but if I'm looking outside of Cristiano Ronaldo, I really think that Sancho, although we haven't got the underlying stats to suggest it, is going to be the man to go for. So thank you for that question. I really do think, Sahul, that is going to be something that we're going to be discussing about for the coming game weeks massively. So some really good questions in here. I'm just trying to catch up with all of them because there's quite a few. So apologies if I did miss any. Dan saying Nacho got a great rank so far this season. Well set up to push on towards that top 10k threshold. Thank you, Dan. Yes, been a few good back-to-back green arrows, thankfully. Trying to break into that 50k, and as I mentioned, still an Antonio owner. So it is possible, guys, if you are an Antonio owner, to still get green arrows. People saying about Bowen being a good asset. Who'd you bench? Amir saying Alonso or Smith Rowe. Well, personally, if I had to have an opinion right now, Alonso with his away fixture against West Ham. Obviously, we have Smith Rowe. I'm just going to bring up the projected points because I think that this is the best indicator for us in the coming game week. So in game week 15 here, we can see we can search for each asset. We have Alonso predicted to score 4.5 points in game week 15. Smith Rowe, on the other hand, is predicted to score 3.6 points in game week 15. Now, of course, he does have his fixture away to Everton, and I really do think that that is a brilliant fixture for Arsenal. Everton right now are in complete freefall, really struggling as a team. Is Smith Rowe a consistent player in this Arsenal team, a big creative threat? Now, while the underlying stats might not necessarily be the best for Smith Rowe, he is still delivering week in, week out. So what move would I go for? If Alonso is your only Chelsea asset, I would start Alonso 100%. And that main reason being is because so many people in the game have at least one Chelsea defender, if not two. So if you go into game week 15 and bench Alonso without having any Chelsea coverage and they keep a clean sheet, that is going to massively affect your game week rank. Now, if it's a case of you have a Chelsea defender and you have Smith Rowe, I still would go for Alonso because of the potential for clean sheets and attacking returns. But I think it's a lot closer than it would be if you didn't have any other Chelsea coverage in defence. So I hope that helps that question there, buddy. So we have a question, just trying to catch up here with a lot of the stuff. Ryan saying, Nacho, would you be selling Gallagher if that's your only route to Jota? Well, as you saw earlier, the actual predicted points for Jota still remain brilliant going forward for him. And I really do think that if you can get Jota into your side, I probably would sacrifice Gallagher to bring him in. Now, with Gallagher in this Crystal Palace side, I think a lot of people are seeing an evolving sort of pattern plays. We're seeing a bit of a deep line Gallagher in certain situations when certain players play. If the likes of Ayew are playing, if they MacArthur being out, if they start bringing Coyote into there, then that's going to bring Gallagher a little bit further back. But when we know MacArthur is available and they can play the two DMs, it gives Gallagher the license to go forward. So while Crystal Palace over the next 6 game weeks have the best fixtures based on our fixture analyzer, I still think that bringing in Jota will pay dividends over the longer term. Now, whether Gallagher is the sacrificial lamb you need to make, I don't necessarily think he is the best sell to make to go to Jota. I'd much rather sell the likes of Mbeumo's or them sort of characters. But if that is your only avenue to Jota, I think over the longer term, that will pay in FPL points. So yes, I would make that move, but I'm not necessarily saying that selling Gallagher is the right move either. It's just a case of Jota being a much better asset in the game right now. Colin saying, thoughts on my transfer? Jimenez to King, Semedo to Reece James. Like those moves personally. What you're losing is an asset like Jimenez, who Wolves have only scored 12 goals this season, really not necessarily being huge goal scoring team. And I think that is a big part of it. And also Wolves' fixtures coming up are really, really poor. You're bringing in an asset like King, which is going to free up plenty of funds, which I imagine has helped you do Semedo to Reece James. And you're bringing in a player like Reece James, who has been in phenomenal form this season. And we know he's available for the West Ham game. So I'm a big fan of those moves, Colin. Big time. Jack saying, I'm thinking of doing Jimenez to King this week and going Mbeumo to Bernardo Silva next week. Thoughts? Okay, so I really like the Jimenez to King move. As we discussed previously, and rewind it back if you haven't already checked it out, we did do a Dennis to King comparison. The move to Jimenez to King I really do like if it does fund other moves in your team. Now, in Mbeumo to Bernardo Silva, I can't argue right now, mainly because, of course, Bernardo Silva has been in unbelievable form. And for me to sit here and say that he's a bad asset is wrong of me. However, in yesterday's price change video, and be sure to check that out after this live stream, we did do a deep dive into Bernardo Silva and his underlying stats. And the big thing that the takeaway point of Bernardo Silva was that he's only had 15 shots and scored 5 goals. Now, is this going to be a sustainable form for him? It really isn't. I believe he's only had maximum of 2 shots in any game. So shot volume really isn't something that comes into his sort of FPL potential. But if you're looking for guaranteed minutes in a Man City team who have brilliant fixtures, then I think he probably is the go-to guy if you want minutes. Pep's come out and said about how he's one of the best midfielders in the world right now. So I think that alone, with his form, is going to get you probably a great asset over that period. Is he the best Man City asset? I'd probably still argue that Foden is the go-to guy, but Paying $1 million more, I can understand why managers are wary of Foden off the back of that injury. So I do like Bernardo Silva, but I would just be very cautious that those attacking returns are not going to be consistent over the next 6 game weeks. Okay, well, a great question here from Ali, who said, I am frustrated of Vardy. Who is the best replacement for him? Bank balance 0. Okay, really interesting topic here, because we've been speaking a lot about the premium assets like Lukaku, like Ronaldo, obvious moves to upgrade in different departments. Now, I think it's worth noting first and foremost that Jamie Vardy over the coming game weeks isn't a bad asset. Over the next 6 game weeks, we have Vardy predicted to score 30.9 points. You can see that over the next 2, 5.1 followed by 6.5. So while Jamie Vardy has been a bit of a frustrating asset, obviously blanking in game week 14, I really don't think that selling Jamie Vardy should be a rage transfer. I think he missed a few big chances, as we know, in game week 14. And looking at his projected points, I still think that he is a good asset over the coming game weeks. Now, if you're looking for replacements for Jamie Vardy, different avenues to go down, then we only have to look at the projected points here to see that a certain Mr. Mikel Antonio, no, I can't suggest you to go Antonio, although I still am a big fan of him. But over the coming game weeks, over the next 2, you certainly can't do Vardy to Antonio. I think Vardy is still the asset to own over the next 2. And as you can see for the projected points going forward, there isn't necessarily any forward that is going to be scoring bigger points than Jamie Vardy. You could go for someone like Christian Benteke at Crystal Palace, but I really don't think that that is a move that is worth making. We've seen Zaha operate down the centre forward position in different games, different scenarios. While Benteke's underlying stats are good, I don't necessarily think that he is the right move to make. You're going from a guaranteed starter in Jamie Vardy with penalties to a potential rotation risk in Benteke playing in Crystal Palace. Not the move I'd want to make. It's all about that team structure. So if you're not, the other question I would say to you is, could you go all the way down from Jamie Vardy to the likes of Josh King? You're getting a penalty taker and guaranteed minutes in a Watford side with good fixtures going forward, and then upgrade another part of your team. Otherwise, I would stick with Jamie Vardy. I know he's been a frustrating asset in the last week, but it was only a few weeks ago where he scored that brace in game week 13. So just think about it more the long term rather than that short term, buddy. Espam said, I test between Sancho versus Rashford at Crystal Palace before I make a choice in game week 16. Yes, if you just tuned in, the big recommendation here is to basically monitor game week 15 with that fixture against Crystal Palace, see how that team structure pans out, and then go forward. Avista said, I want to sell Rafinha. Who do you think is the best West Ham player to buy? We covered this a little bit earlier. If you are looking between the front 3 behind Antonio, I still think Bowen is the man to target. He is still the best pick. I know he's a little bit pricier, but I think he is probably still the man to go for. A few people are suggesting Bowen as well, so I think that's definitely a great shout. Victor saying, any replacement for Semedo? He has 0 in the bank. Also, is it better to target the Man United midfielders or forwards in the upcoming games? Okay, so replacements for Semedo over the coming game weeks. Well, while I'm in the points predictor, we can see here that Semedo is currently priced at, I'm just going to get the price up for Semedo's, apologies, because what we can do is filter Semedo and get an idea. So if you have 0 in the bank, you have 4.9 million available. So we can see here that the Arsenal defenders are still probably the way to go over the next 6 game weeks. We have Tomiyasu just outscoring Ben White on 23.2 compared to 23. And then we have Dunk at Brighton on 22.6. Christensen on 22.2. But what I would say there is with Christensen, whereas at Tomiyasu, White and Dunk, you're getting guaranteed game time. I would argue that Christensen's is a little bit more rotational. So I'd probably avoid Christensen unless we know that Chalobah is out really long term. Then that might make Christensen a better asset. Otherwise, as we can see here, Tomiyasu isn't a bad pick coming forward. And we can see with the fixtures coming up, away to Everton, home to Southampton, home to West Ham, and then the likes of Leeds, Norwich and Wolves. Some really nice fixtures for Arsenal. And while I don't think Tomiyasu falls in the same category as the likes of Reece Jameses of the world, Trent's in terms of output offensively, I think if you're looking for a steady player in your team, you couldn't go too far wrong with Tomiyasu, but I appreciate Arsenal sometimes are a difficult team to hold in FPL, so I appreciate that. I would also say maybe Tavares is an option as well in that left-back spot. Just checking out some more here. Farron saying, should I play KDB? I would probably say sell KDB. I think KDB is going to have his moments in FPL. That is for sure. He's been one of the best FPL assets of recent years. But we don't know whether he is actually going to be fit. He's returning from COVID. I would probably say sell him. Could even move him to the likes of Fernandes with the anticipation of these Man United fixtures. If you want to keep it differential, that could be a nice sideways move until we know that KDB is up to fitness and getting guaranteed game time. Okay, so we've got some good questions in here. Josephine saying, Trent or Van Dijk? It's got to be Trent. Attack and returns are still unbelievable for him. Van Dijk, very deadly on set pieces, but it has to be Trent Alexander-Arnold for me, definitely. I'm just going to keep up the predicted points so everyone can see them while I go through the questions here. Like I said, guys, please fire away any more questions. We're going to be on here for another 10 minutes. I'm going to try and answer as many as possible. Football 1080p. It's great, great definition there. What would suggest me to do with Benrahma, buy Bowen, or keep him? Okay, so as we saw with the projected points, Bowen is projected to score more than Benrahma, but not necessarily enough for you to do a direct sideways move. If you have a West Ham asset in midfield, I would either hold Benrahma or look to move away from him in another direction of another team. I wouldn't go necessarily Benrahma to Bowen. I don't think that is a wise move of your free transfer. Josephine saying, what of Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold? So I think this is something we can definitely touch on in the player heat map section, because the big thing about Robertson, years gone by, is that he has been not necessarily toe-to-toe with Trent Alexander-Arnold, but he's offered a real nice differential option to Trent. However, start of the season, particularly over the first, I believe, 8 game weeks, Robertson was not even in the same planet as Trent Alexander-Arnold. We couldn't even consider him. Trent was delivering week in, week out, whereas Robertson was ticking along with the occasional clean sheet and nothing else to show from it whatsoever. So what we're going to do here is bring up a comparison on the player heat map section between Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold. And you see that Robertson's played slightly less minutes than Trent, but not enough to necessarily be not comparing the two. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. And first and foremost, you can see there, Trent Alexander-Arnold, 90 points compared to Andy Robertson's 45. So he's absolutely dominating him in regards to FPL returns. And the bonus points for Trent, 15 in comparison to Robertson's 4. So clearly Trent has been the go-to man. But it's worth mentioning, of course, that with Trent being considerably more, I believe he's 1 million more now, I can understand why managers might be looking to go a bit differential with Robertson. And we can see here with the touch heat map, they are basically the flip of each other. You can see Trent dominating in the right-hand side, Robertson on the left-hand side as expected, both having set pieces, Robertson taking them off the left-hand side, Trent off the right. So you're not necessarily picking an asset between the two here because that one's on set pieces, one isn't. Both are on set pieces. The one thing I would say is Trent is more of an outfield free kick taker as opposed to Robertson, whereas Robertson does have the corners alongside Trent. And you can see with the touch heat map, I wouldn't even necessarily say that one or the other is dominating in regards to touches in the box. You can see both equally have touches on their flanks within the box. But really when we come into underlying stats, this is where Trent is just absolutely dominating Robertson. You can see 1 goal to 0 of Robertson, which obviously isn't necessarily huge in Trent's favour, but 1.1 expected goals. But the big one here, 21 shots for Trent, 2 for Andy Robertson. That is the big factor here. And why always everybody says with Trent, he is basically a winger playing as a defender in FPL. 21 shots for a right back. It's not even a right winger, it's a right back in this Liverpool team. It's unbelievable. And that alone should probably be the reason why you go for Trent over Robertson. That shot volume alone is going to be delivering you over across the course of the season. Clearly, if Robertson does get goals, they're going to be few and far between just because he doesn't take any. That is mainly the reason why. And you can see here with the expected assists as well. Trent Alexander-Arnold 5.24 in comparison to Robertson's 2.21, and Trent actually getting more with 7 in comparison to the 4 of Robertson. So there's no debate here. Trent is the man going forward. But what I want to quickly look at for those who have probably said, yeah, but Robertson's been great over the last few game weeks. Let's look from game week 10 to game week 14. 4 game weeks for us to compare the two. And I think probably a lot of people have said that Robertson has been the man to own over that period. Well, Trent still dominating Robertson over the last 4. 39 points in comparison to 20 of Andy Robertson. But you would say here that the underlying stats are a little bit closer, I guess. But still, Trent in the expected assist department, Robertson 1.81 in comparison to Trent's 2.49. It has to be Trent, but I appreciate Robertson is delivering a bit more now in comparison to what he was doing in previous game weeks. So I hope that has helped there. Right, I apologise, guys, if I have missed any. There is a lot of questions here, and they're all flying through, so I'm just going to pick up some along the way. Imra saying, who would you take between Dennis and Smith Rowe? Really tricky one to say here because they both play in different positions. Completely depends on your squad. I would say that Dennis is probably a great move because you're likely to downgrade a forward, which is going to free up additional funds in your squad. One saying Foden to Sancho, or Foden to Sancho, Jota or Bernardo long term. Okay, so Foden to Sancho, Jota has to be Jota right now. Basically, Jota is delivering, Sancho we're predicting to deliver, and Bernardo is delivering, but probably on an unsustainable sort of form. So I would argue that Jota is still the best player, and we saw that in the projected points over the coming game weeks. Brandon saying, who would you go for between Dennis and King in for Jimenez? Well, Brandon, if you just tuned in, be sure to rewind the video to the start. We covered that in Hot Topic 1, King versus Dennis. We came to the decision that I think Josh King, based on the underlying stats and penalties, probably is the Watford player to own. But there's no denying that Dennis has been in unbelievable form, and there's no reason why Dennis can't outscore King. We've seen that already this season. But just based on the underlying stats and penalties, King is just going to get the nod for us. Karimo saying, I want to sell Cristiano Ronaldo for Watkins. Then next game week, go to King and Antonio with upgrade of defence and midfield. I want to sell Cristiano. I would not sell Cristiano Ronaldo. That's for sure. I would not. If anything, it's the time to buy Cristiano Ronaldo personally. I know Watkins has been in good form recently, but I just think that he is the go-to man right now, Cristiano Ronaldo. I wouldn't be selling Watkins. I do like Watkins as an asset. He definitely has been delivering recently. If we look at his, I know a few people have been asking about Watkins, so let me just quickly bring him up. Aston Villa, we can see here, Watkins over the course of game weeks 1 to 14 right now. We can see his underlying stats here. 4 goals, 3.09 expected goals, which is really great to see. I think that's a good underlying stat to compare him with. 25 shots and 12 shots on target. Really good underlying stats for Ollie Watkins. Definitely someone I would have on the radar going forward, but probably not right now, just with the coming Villa fixtures that we know of. So he'll say neither is the wrong choice. Yes, totally agree with that. I think that is the perfect situation right now. The stats, although they are favouring Josh King, I don't think there's enough to necessarily say that there's one guaranteed pick right now. So I appreciate that is probably the move to make. Jahan, I can't pronounce. My apologies. Jasan saying, shall I keep Foden double up from City midfielders? If you have Foden right now, I would recommend keeping him. With a brilliant fixture away to Watford, I really think that that is probably the way I would go right now. I wouldn't be making a sideways move to Bernardo Silva. I think Foden is still the man to own if you are happy with having a few rotational risks. So yes, I would go for that. Got a question here from George 100. Should I keep Alonso or move to Diaz/James? George, I probably right now would hold Alonso. Now, it's worth mentioning in a recent press conference that Tuchel did say that they have trialled Saul as a left wing back. So that is something to consider going forward. I know a lot of managers right now are worried about Alonso in regards to an actual eye test perspective. Defensively, not necessarily performing, but from an FPL perspective, a brilliant asset. What I would say with Alonso, I probably would hold. I don't think you necessarily need to do a sideways move to Reece James. and you need to have funds available to make that move. Diaz, yes, I think you are going to get the clean sheets in the Man City side. But again, I think you should just then free up some more additional funds and get Cancelo rather than Diaz. So for me, Alonso would be a hold right now. Hope that helps, George. And what I am going to do just for you, George, is to throw up the player heat map section, and we're going to quickly compare Alonso to Reece James and just get a quick comparison here between the two, if I can get him up. Obviously, as I mentioned, Alonso has played... Wow, I was about to say Alonso has played way less minutes than James, but Alonso's actually played more minutes than James, which is crazy to think, because obviously Alonso has been out of the picture for so long. But you can see there, points per game, Reece James 7.6 in comparison to Alonso's 5.3. And when we come down here to underlying stats, 4 goals for Reece James on an expected goals of 1.4, 1 goal for Alonso on an expected goals of 0.75. Shots, not a huge discrepancy, 15 to 11. Shots in the box, 10 to 6. And expected assists, 2.02 to 0.93. Now, we have to remember, Reece James has been in unbelievable form so far this season. And yes, I would say he is the best Chelsea asset. But at 5.7 million, I believe, I'll be holding Alonso. Okay. Regular. Okay, I think we are going to wrap it up with a bit of a comparison with... A few people are mentioning about Maddison as an option. So what we're going to do here is we're going to quickly throw up a comparison with Maddison over the recent game weeks. Let me know in the chat, who would you like me to compare Maddison against? Let me know and I can get it up. Maddison, I think, is someone we need to discuss. Throw in the chat, is there a midfielder that you want me to discuss? Is there multiple midfielders we want to compare? If that is the case, I can then go into the fix comparison matrix and compare multiple assets, or I can stick to it with just a 1v1 comparison on the player heat map section. Let me know in the chat, guys. I'll get that lovely stuff sorted for you. Drop it in there and I'll get that compared for you. Sure is saying, compare King and Dennis. Basically, what I would recommend is rewinding the video to around the 10-minute mark, maybe 15-minute mark, and basically compare... Sorry, I done a hot topic section, basically comparing King and Dennis, went into loads of detail between the two. I'll be repeating myself, so I really recommend, buddy, rewinding it to there, and what you'll be able to do is basically just go through a real deep dive section. So I really recommend that one, mate. So... let's have a look at, there's loads of recommendations here. We have got Rafinha, we've got Smith Rowe as a comparison, we've got Bernardo, Jota, Bowen. Right, I think there's too many here for me to do a 1v1 comparison. So we're going to come to the fixed comparison matrix, and we are going to, honestly guys, if you haven't already, be sure to sign up for the free premium trial over on Fantasy Football Fix, because there is some brilliant tools available for us to compare. And I know you do get your fix here on the live stream, but you really can delve into all the underlying stats and really get an idea on the moves that you want to make. So you're distracting me, guys. Stop distracting me. Right, so James Maddison as a midfield option. We're going to be comparing him against Bowen. We're going to be throwing in Rafinha into the equation. And to remind myself, we're going to be throwing in Silva, Bernardo Silva. Apologies, that's the wrong Bernardo. If I can find Bernardo, that is. There we go. Found Bernardo. Okay, last position up for grabs, guys. Who do you want in there? Who do you want in there? We got Maddison versus Bowen, Kane or Jesus, Bernardo, Bowen, Fornals, Foden. Okay, let's throw Gundogan in. Let's get another Man City asset in there, because I know a lot of people are interested between Bernardo or Gundogan, so this is going to tick a lot of those boxes. I've left it on the current underlying stats. Let's just take a look at this. Touches in the opposition box. Let's also throw in some shots. Let's also look at let's look at this for now. Maybe big chances created, just as a general view. And the big thing about this, guys, is, of course, we are looking at assets here that have played very different minutes. So what I'm going to look at first and foremost is the totals, just to get a well-rounded view on how they're getting on. and then we can look at potentially the averages per game. And of course, a lot of these are priced very similar brackets. So you can see here, Maddison has played 832 minutes. Now, we know from these stats right now that the 3 goals, the assists, the touch in the opposition box are basically all coming from recent data. So when you look at this graphic, I would recommend you thinking about Maddison more on a short-term basis. He hasn't been doing this across the course of the season, more over the last 3 game weeks. Whereas Bowen, Rafinha, Bernardo Silva, and I'd probably just argue Gundogan has been delivering it more on a consistent basis. And when I look at bringing in an asset, I personally don't like to make decisions based on 2 game weeks of data. And although we have got 800 minutes of Maddison, I'd probably only argue the last 200, 300 probably people are thinking about in regards to the decision making. So it's worth mentioning that. But you can see there, Bernardo Silva leading the way on 69 points. Then we have Rafinha on 61, Bowen on 60, and then Maddison on 52. But as I mentioned, the majority of his points coming in the recent games. 6 goals for Rafinha, obviously that fluky penalty in game week 14. And then we have the 5 for Bernardo Silva. And as I mentioned, the shot volume isn't necessarily there with 15 shots this season, so suggests he's going to continue it. But I think he's still a brilliant asset going forward. Touches in the opposition box, no surprises that Bernardo Silva in a Man City team is right up there. But interesting to see that Bowen on 63 and Maddison only on 28. But we would probably expect that because he operates a bit deeper and a creative role in that Leicester team. Big chances created. It's very, very interesting actually to see Maddison already getting 3 with the lack of minutes that he has had. So looking at the coming game weeks, the projected points, guys, the big part of it here over the next 5 game weeks. Bernardo Silva still projected to score the most on 22. 21.3 for Bowen. 18.9 for Rafinha. Maddison only on 15.3. And I know Gundogan's 15.7, but he is slight injury risk. So that is going to skew those projected points because of those expected minutes not necessarily being easier to predict. So Maddison right now, as we can see, stats okay, 3 goals, 2 assists, not too bad for an asset, but he is still projected to score less points than the likes of Rafinha, Bowen and Bernardo Silva. So what I would recommend is if you are looking to pile in on these Leicester fixtures going forward, you want a differential, then Maddison isn't a bad pick. But whereas we can look at Bowen, Rafinha, Bernardo Silva and Gundogan over a bigger picture, let's forget about Gundogan, we can get a bit more information, bigger data to make our decisions. Maddison, much more shorter term. Don't be surprised if those stats fall off over the coming game weeks. Right, guys. So we have lots of good stuff here. Tom saying, Kane outscored by the likes of Allen and Romeo since game week 8 shambles. What we saying? Norwich and done. Tom, that is really... that is so worrying to see that the likes of Allen and Romeo have scored more points since game week 8. Oh my God, that is scary to think. Tom, what are my thoughts right now of Harry Kane? Guys, first and foremost, if you're in the chat, let me know, are you a Harry Kane owner? And what are you doing with Harry Kane? Are you selling him before Norwich? Are you crazy enough to sell him before Norwich? Or are you giving him Norwich and then shipping him out afterwards? Let me know. I'm just going to throw up the fixture analyzer just so we can use that as a basis for when we discuss Kane going forward. And you can see there Harry Kane has that Norwich fixture, but then Brighton, Leicester and Liverpool in the next 3. I wouldn't necessarily say they're tough fixtures, but that Liverpool one is very daunting for Kane. So Tom, what am I doing with Kane? We got to keep him for the Norwich fixture. I know that Harry Kane has been absolutely woeful so far this season, but I really think that if we have held him this long over the course of the season so far, especially the last 2 game weeks, I think the home fixture against Norwich was the one that everybody was licking their lips for. And Norwich, with Dean Smith at the helm, of course, probably improved a little bit, but we saw against Newcastle, still couldn't put the sword to them with 10 men. I don't think Norwich are necessarily the most expansive team there. I'm not going to give Spurs too much space, but I just think it is tough to sell Kane with that home fixture against Norwich. I just think we got to keep him. I know it's going to be painful, guys, and let me know in the chat, what are you doing? But I think holding Kane for Norwich, we have to do. And then, as we can see, with the fixtures going forward, we can then go into Ronaldo potentially and get Norwich again in game week 16. We can have another bite at the bullet. I think that's probably what I would suggest going forward. So guys, I've been rambling for about an hour 15, and I think we have covered the majority of the questions. So I am going to wrap it up here. I really do appreciate you guys being in on the chat. I really hope that has provided some value, and hopefully the Fantasy Football Fix website has given you the opportunity just to have a nice balance between opinion and stats. I really hope that it provided some real value. So thank you so much for tuning in. As I mentioned, guys, we as always, you can tweet us at Fantasy Football Fix over on Twitter if you have any questions. We can obviously use the site to back up some questions that you might have going into game week 15. I apologize if I missed any of your questions. And again, thank you for tuning in. If you want to support the channel, make sure you like the stream, hit that subscribe button. And as you know, with daily content dropping, you don't want to be missing a thing. So hit that notification bell. So massive shout out for tuning in, guys. Thank you so much. All the best this game week. Fingers crossed, fellow Kane owners, that we finally get those returns. And, you know, we all know that Ronaldo is going to be a big player going in the coming game week. So all the best, guys. Hope your arrows are green, and we will talk very soon. Cheers.